Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 172. We're in the middle of the 3-week mourning period, the saddest time in the Jewish calendar. This week will begin the month of Av, with which also begins the 9 days. So the 3 weeks in general is a period of mourning where we remember the destruction of the temples. And the 9 days, it only intensifies with additional laws and halachas and customs, things that we avoid doing of pleasure and leisure and joy in commemoration of this sad time. So of course the obvious question is, why are we still grieving after thousands of years of the temple's destruction? Both temples, in addition to the other events that happened, the other sad events at the end of Attaining, the Mishnah and the Gemara in Attaining elaborate upon the 5. The Mishnah speaks about the 5 things that happened on the 17th of Tammuz, the 5 things that happened on the 9th of Av. But in general, this whole period of time, which we call the general 3 weeks, and the last 9 days of those 3 weeks, culminating with the saddest day, Tisha B'Av. What is its significance and role in our lives today? And here's one of the places where Chassidus Applied is so relevant. Chassidus comes to illuminate, because we know that there's the concept of constantly and always serving God with joy. Yivdus Hashem b'simcha. So what purpose would there be in focusing on such negativity? Both in a collective sense and in an individual sense, that's not the way of the Jewish people. We always look for the positive, though we've gone through difficult times, very difficult times. So clearly we need to look deeper into this period of time to appreciate and understand that even though on the surface level, on one level, it definitely is a sad time and we have to acknowledge that, but it's never a sadness as an end in itself. It's a sadness that leads, almanas, like the Medrash in Yalkut Shmeni says, that in the month of Ariel, which is the month of Aryeh, which is the mazel of Leo, lion, the lion Aryeh, month of Av. Yove Ariel, Nebuchadnezzar came, he's called Ariel, and Chorav, and destroyed Ariel, the Beis HaMikdash, which was called Ariel, Almanas, on condition that in this same Ariel, the same month, will come Ariel, Hashem, Aryeshag Mila Yira, Hashem is called Aryeh, and will rebuild the 3rd temple, which is called Ariel. The Almanas is the key thing here, that every negative experience in life, collectively and individually, is almanas, is a stepping stone, a catalyst, a springboard to reach a greater place. In other words, nothing is in life is stationary. Everything is mobile. Everything is moving. If you want to use the Chassidic language, you could say there's yesh, ayin, yesh. Every state of being, in order to metamorphosize and transform to a greater state of being, needs to go through an ayin be'emtza. The yesh being a state of itness, then comes a state of ayin, which is like a vacuum, where things can seem void, can seem empty, can seem negative, with a stepping stone in order to reach a greater yesh, the almanas, on condition it should reach a greater place in life. So if you really want to, so to speak, choreograph your life, you're either in one of those 3 places. You're either in a state of contentment and relative success, yesh, where things are working all right, or you're in a state of ayin, your status quo has been upset, has been disrupted, and it creates a restlessness, even sometimes worse than restlessness, a type of disillusionment. Disorientation is the right word I would like to use, which is a form of Golus, whether it's a Golus proti or a Golus kloli, a form of displacement, a form of dissonance, but it's a step toward the third stage, and that is the yesh, to bring us to a greater place. If you could look at your life that way, there's every part of your life is one of those 3 places. And you'll always know that it's always moving, as the Rebbe I explained, and using the analogy, the Ferris wheel, the first Ferris wheel ever was in Vienna. I believe it was then that the Rebbe Rashab used it as a mashal, an analogy when someone was complaining that his parnasa was not well and he was looking for a bracha. So the Rebbe Rashab said, remember, life is like a Ferris wheel, like a galgal hachezer, a turning wheel. There are times you're on top, but then the wheel turns, and there'll be times that you're not on top. You'll be below. But know well that it'll continue to turn, and you'll be on top again. So it's a cycle life, and life goes through these different stages. And when we know how to navigate these ups and downs, that is when life becomes extremely rich and meaningful. And as such, the 9 days, starting of course with Chodesh, which will be the middle of this week, Chodesh actually is tonight, is Chodesh, will be the beginning of a period of time that, one second, we're going through Chodesh, of course, will be a beginning of time which is like the ayin be'emtza. So when Chassidus talks about the idea of the 9 days, it talks in the context also of the Maimorim of Nachamu Eter, the Tofrei Shayim from the Rebbe I, when he discusses this, he speaks about it in the context of what Arizal says, why the 15th of Av is the greatest holidays. And he explains Yom Kippur, we understand, but why Chamisha Asa B'Gav? Because the Churban was in Malchus, and Malchus is the Levana, and therefore the Aliyah is in Malchus. So even though the 15th of every month is a full moon, which signifies a completion, but a full moon that comes after the Churban in Malchus, the Yezida Atzuma, we call the Yezida, what's it called, the Yezida, the tremendous descent of the destruction of the temple, Malchus, it follows by the 15th of Av that follows Yedid Tzedek Aliyah, so the Aliyah is far greater, and that's why Chamisha Sabav is such a great, powerful Yom Tov comparable to Yom Kippur, which also comes after the Chet Egel, the second Luchas, a type of Baal Tshuva power, the power that the intensity that comes from transforming even the dark. So in that context, you can say that Tisha B'Av, the 9, it's 9. Not 15, 9 is where we hear about 9. So in Sefer Yetzirah, one of the earliest, or maybe the earliest book of Kabbalah, he said about the 10 spheres, Eser v'lei Teisha, Eser v'lei Achadasa. It's 10 but not 9, or 10 and not 11. 9 means almost missing it's almost 10, but it's missing the key one, Malchus. The Malchus is missing. And Malchus, you could say in Aveda, has many meanings, but one of them is dignity. One of them is the integration. You could have all the faculties of your life. You could have all the faculties in your life of moichin and midas, intellect and cognitive, chabad, chagas, nehi. And you could be brilliant in the intellectual, cognitive faculties, but powerful in the emotional ones. But if you're lacking dignity, you're lacking that sense of internalization, that it means that you are like a melech, like a malka, then everything is compromised. The destruction of Malchus affects everything. So 9 and 10 and not 9, that missing one is the key thing that we need to fill in. Like you say, Gela and Gula. What's the difference in Golus and Gula? The one, the Aleph of Alufa Shalem. You could have everything there. But if you're missing that unifying principle, if you're missing the unifying divine element, then everything is compromised. And everything is in a state of Golus. You add the Aleph, then the Gela itself becomes Gula. So from this we can derive many, many lessons in our personal lives from this period of time, to apply the idea of how our dignity is in some ways have been violated or betrayed due to our displacement, when a person is disconnected from their spiritual purpose, which is essentially what the Beis HaMikdash was all about. The Beis HaMikdash was Hashem v'shachanti b'seicham, God's presence resting among you, b'seicham, within you, within each one of us, which means that divine awareness, the divine consciousness was resting among us, and when the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, that divine consciousness becomes concealed. And it's our job is to rebuild it within ourselves. And that's what this period of the 9 days is about. Rebuilding the Malchus, rebuilding that dignity that comes from understanding your calling and your purpose in life, your mission, that you are valuable, that you are indispensable, that you matter. That's what infuses all the 9 levels, all your faculties with a sense of direction and purpose. That's on an individual level. And on a collective level, obviously, means that the entire Jewish nation, the entire people of the world, because we know the Beis HaMikdash was not just for the Jewish people, based filled Kol Ha'amim, we say, in the Attaining of Shabbos Chazon next week, that this is a house of prayer for people of all nations. in Yeshaya, from that Yeshaya we say the Haftarah, in that beginning of Yeshaya. And it is also, as the Medrash says, that if the non-Jews knew, the nations of the world knew how much the Beis HaMikdash brought them blessing, they would have surrounded it with legions of protection and never allowed it to be destroyed. So the Beis HaMikdash is more than just a building, it's a window, it's a door, it's a portal that connects Shara Shamayim, as Yaakov Avinu said. This is the gate to heaven, the place that connects heaven and earth, spirit and matter, the soul and form and function, what we do and who we are. And as such, the 9 days takes on that deeper meaning. I want to add two more things. The Chodesh Av is also the yahrzeit of Aaron HaKohen, as the Torah tells us. Aaron HaKohen God. The 5th of Av, later this week, will be the yahrzeit of the Arizal. It's interesting, why the Aaron and Arizal Dafka? So you have an interesting parallel to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, who also, when is his yahrzeit? His yahrzeit is, again, in a sad period in time, Shviras Eimer. So I believe I may have discussed it here in this program or different places, that Magdim Refuah L'Makom, God always precedes the cure before the illness. These three individuals in history all represented deeper unity that we find even amidst discord and divisiveness. This is a deeper unity that we find, a deeper power that comes from Tznius, from the inner dimension, that allows us to overcome and deal with these challenges. And that's why they're yahrzeit, because a yahrzeit is meant to give us strength. And they all signify that. Aaron HaKohen was a unifier. Avid mitamidav shel Aaron, the Mishnah says, be from the students of Aaron, Oyev Shalom v'Reidav Shalom, Eivas Habriyas v'Karvan l'Teira. Aaron was a unifier. He was a unifier in the sense where he brought together even Brias, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, even if they are Brias Ba'alma, they can't find any quality except that they're creatures of God. He brought them together, and that's why Vayivku, when he passed away, his yahrzeit, Chodesh Av, everybody, it says, all the men and women of Israel mourned. Whereas by Moshe, the emphasis is on the men. Now, women, of course, also mourned by Moshe. But Aaron, it was more obvious because he made Shalom Bayis. He made peace between friends who had quarrels and disagreements. That was Aaron. What did the Arizal? The Arizal is Megala Primis Attaining. Primis Attaining connects and unites. And that's where you find a phenomenon with Arizal similar to Rashbi, that despite the fact that in Jewish history and the Jewish sages there were different camps, so to speak, different schools of thought, and many of them disagreed, comes to Arizal, he unites all people, whether it's Sfardim or Ashkenazim, Chassidim, non-Chassidim, all elements of Jewish community, of the Jewish community, all go by the Arizal. And same thing with Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, that again, he was a uniter because they were Megala Primis Attaining. Primis unites the soul, unites things. Now, obviously, all Tanoim and all Amoraim and all great leaders, all are uniting factors. They all bring Torah, but some stand out. So in a sense, in the time when it's sad, we're given this additional strength, and like a preceding the healing, preceding the cure preceding the illness, to help us overcome the divisiveness, the sinas chinam, the baseless hatred that brought the destruction of the temple. Aaron did that, Arizal did that, and Rashbi in his time did that, and that's why Shviras Eimer, which is when the Mageh, the epidemic of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, they did not show respect to one another. Again, divisiveness, that's also a sad period in time. And Rashbi was one of the students that survived because he did live by the principle of V'ahavta kamocha zel kol gadol b'Torah. So we have here in the 9 days a directives and lessons. And that is why the Rebbe brought it all alive more than anyone ever before him, especially being that we're on the threshold of the Geula, that to turn the 9 days into Simcha days, of course, Eifan Hamut, in the way it's permissible in Halach, quoting the Munkatcher, the Minchas Salazar, V'shenichnas of Mamayitim b'Simcha. As Of enters the Mishnah, the Gemara says, you diminish in Simcha. So he teaches V'shenichnas of Mamayitim, you're Mamayitim of the sadness of b'Simcha, with joy. Obviously, Kudi Hashem Yishar Mesam Chelev, a joy that is permitted in Torah, which is the joy of Torah and mitzvahs, by learning especially the laws that are connected to these days, the laws connected to the Beis HaMikdash, whether it's in Sefer Yecheskel and Tanakh, or in Sech Midas in the Shas, Hilchos Beis Abchir in the Rambam, as well as make siyumim every day, as the Rabbi Rashab did. Not in order to eat meat necessarily, but making a siyum adds in a simcha, which becomes simcha shel Torah, simcha b'siyum shel Torah, b'gemara shel Torah. So it's a simcha, again, a simcha within the context and allowed. And even on Tisha B'Av to make siyumim, Masechta Meid Cotton, Masechta that you're allowed to learn. It's all the ways, and of course to add all the ways that are permissible to add and reveal the deeper joy. It wasn't some type of just, okay, let's mitigate and somewhat weaken, temper the sadness of this period, but it's actually to reveal its inner meaning. That's its real purpose. And of course, also add, as we say in the end of the Haftarah for Shabbos Chazon, Tzim Mishpat Tipada B'Shavah B'Tzedakah, that Zion is redeemed with Mishpat, which is Halacha and Torah, and Tzedakah and charity. These are the forces that unite, and these are forces that counter the factors that caused the Churban in the first place, and help us reconnect and reintegrate with the Malchus, where we have the 10, not just 9, the completion, and ultimately leading to the 15, which is the 15th of Av, the full moon, which is Leih Yom Tov, such a great celebration because it's the ultimate elevation that follows the great descent of Tisha B'Av. I want to just also refer you to some cross-referencing the 9 days, episodes 28, 75, 76, and 125. These are, as I mentioned many times, the previous episodes where some of these ideas were discussed, and you can access all that at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. You have there all the archives. They're timestamped, which means you can find each section just what you're looking for. You can search for them, and all the other resources that are connected to MyLife. I should also use this opportunity. That's a place where you can also submit your question or comment. Thank God you've been doing so, and I really appreciate it. I am, as I always mention, always growing and learning from people's questions and comments, as well as you can weigh in with your thoughts on something that may disagree or agree with what I've said. I'm always happy to share that and read your ideas. So we will, with that, move to the next topic, which is Machlokes, connect divisiveness, which of course is related to this period in time. I should also add, before I go to there, that this coming Shabbos is Shabbos Devarim and Shabbos Chazon. I mentioned a few times about the Haftarah. Shabbos Chazon, of course, we also see the same message. Shabbos Chazon, on one hand, the literal meaning is Chazon Yeshayahu. This is the vision of Isaiah, the vision of Yeshaya, where he's the vision, unfortunate vision, where he sees the destruction coming due to the transgressions and the sins of the people. But Rebbe I, who, like other Chassidic masters, and of course the Tzemach Tzedek explains Eicha L'Malyusa Eicha in a positive way, so that Rebbe I gives this meaning interpretation of Shabbos Chazon. Chazon means to see. It's a Shabbos of vision, that each Jew is shown the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, the third temple, Mirachik, from a distance, in order to invoke Gaguyim, yearning, and do what we have to do in order to have that Beis Hamikdash rebuilt. And he gives a mashal there of a father, a king, who, the love of his great love for his son, weaved for him a beautiful shirt, and he gave it to the child. The child was playing with it, and ultimately, what happened was the child tore it. So what did the father do? He went and weaved even a better and more beautiful shirt, and gave it to him, and again he tore it. So this time the father said, instead of me giving it to you and you destroying it, let me show it to you once a year from a distance. It'll evoke in you the appreciation and the yearning, and this time when you finally earn it, and not just as a gift, you will make sure that it will never be destroyed again. And he said that's the difference between the first, second, and third Beis Hamikdash. The Eibush is the father, the Jewish people are the child. The shirt is an example for the Beis Hamikdash by Slish by Sheni. The Rebbe explained a number of years why a mashal of a shirt, not the mashal of a building. Here's not the place to go into it. I believe I discussed that in some of the previous episodes on this topic. But both of them were destroyed, And finally, I showed to you, the Eibishter says, I will show you from a distance, Chazain, every Shabbos Chazain. And that's showing that we see the Beis HaMikdash from a distance. Awakes in us that sense of wanting it and doing what we have to do, which is a sofa and Torah mitzvahs and tshuva, in order to bring a stronger chizuk, a stronger connection to Yiddishkeit, in order to bring that Beis HaMikdash. So this again, you see the theme of the negative, the literal interpretation, seemingly a negative vision, but really within that lies a bit more powerful vision, like the vision of Rabbi Akiva. He looked at the same Harabayas, the same desolate wilderness after the destruction of the temple as his colleagues did, and they cried and he laughed. So there's the same vision. You can see a deeper vision, and who sees it? Who sees the pnimius of it. So now let's move over with that. I wanted to just add that point, and to move to the topic of Machlokes. So here are the questions that were asked. Divisiveness and discord, sinas chinam, was the cause of the destruction of the temple and Golus, and is a major reason that the Geula has not yet arrived. It seems that strife and disharmony, Machlokes, are deeply built into Golus. Is Machlokes an inevitable part of Golus? And if so, do we have any control over it? Second question someone asks, when will this finally come to an end? How can Lubavitch be so split, having simultaneously two different Farbrengens on 3rd of Tammuz and other dates? And anywhere you look, you always see there's two different camps, if not many more. Okay. So yes, indeed, Machlokes is directly connected to Golus. You could even say they're synonymous. I mentioned before, the Talmud says that due to sinas chinam, baseless hatred, caused the destruction of the temple. So you could say, what's the connection? The connection is very simple. How could a father rest among his children when his children are not agreeing with each other, are fighting with each other? He can't be there. It's the greatest pain for a parent to see that. The same thing with the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah, what's the point having a Shekhinah Beis HaMikdash when the people who the whole Shekhinah is supposed to manifest are fighting with each other? The Keli has been compromised. So it's a cause and effect. So you ask yourself the question, what caused which? Did the Churban cause the Machlokes, or did the Machlokes cause the Churban? Here clearly is the sinas chinam that caused the Churban. It is the people when they're not kelim, when they're not proper containers, they're not united. God blesses us when we're together. Achdus is a keli for bracha. The end of the whole Gemara, all the Mishnayos ends. The only bracha Hashem found, loy elo, which means leikuva. The only bracha Hashem found the only keli Hashem found for bracha is shalom, and the whole Torah was given lasa shalom va'elam. When there's no shalom, God forbid, it's hard for brachas to manifest as much as Hashem wants to give it to them. So yes, it's absolutely connected to us. On the other hand, obviously, once you're in Golus, so then it becomes a vicious cycle. Golus itself, displacement, creates even more divisiveness because the Shekhinah is concealed. However, to suggest that this is a fatalistic view and we have no control over it, this is just built into Golus, is incorrect. We absolutely do have that. We're given the mitzvah and we're given the directive that we have to do whatever is possible to correct the situation. And there's a famous Yerushalmi that says every generation of the Beis HaMikdash was not rebuilt. It's as if that generation destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. So if you need the point driven home, that's right there. What is it saying? That it's not just there, that happened then, and now we're just victims. It means we are proactive. We are active participants in the whole process. And when we take a proactive stand, we can reverse it and bring the Beis HaMikdash. And there's the different sikhs that Rebbe spoke about this in a very powerful way. Keravel Taint, the famous sikh, Keravel Taint, is what? That this is every generation has that responsibility to do what it takes to create the unity which would bring the Beis HaMikdash Ashlish. So we're absolutely active participants and we cannot say we have no control over it. At the same time, it does say, as the Rebbe Rashab said, the Frierdiker Rebbe said in the famous sikh, Yehi Hashem Elokeinu Im Avosenu. He says, Nish betun zeratz, not with our will did we go into Golus, and not with our will we go out of Golus. Because the actual decision when we go into Golus and when we leave Golus, that's Hashem's decision. But our role is a very, very specific and very distinct and very clear one. We do what we take, and then Hashem will take us out. So we can't force Hashem's hand. But when we do what we have to do, then the result will be, the Sipa will bring that Mesubah. It's not a contradiction. So because saying, when will the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi be rebuilt? You and I can't decide that. Then Hashem decides. But can we create the Keli Machzik Baruch Hashalom? Absolutely. And just like Sinas Chinam caused it, we can create Avas Chinam, baseless love, which means unconditional love, to have the Keli that Hashem will then decide to bring the Geula and the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. So we absolutely have control over it, even though we are not the deciders of when exactly what happens as a result of our actions. So we say, Maseinu v'Avedisenu, yes, our actions and our Veda absolutely totally, and that is dependent, Alter Rebbe says, the beginning of chapter 37 in Tanya, Mesa Mashiach and Tchisa Mesi. So our Veda is the direct cause. And then there's what Hashem does as a result of that cause. As far as situation in different communities, I do not like to say there's Machlokes and Lubavitch. To me, it always reminds me of the story. I think I shared it here. I remember when my father once wrote an article in the Algemeine, and he wrote that time to put out the fire of Machlokes and Lubavitch. So I asked my father permission if I could write a rebuttal article, and since it's my father, out of respect, so he said, of course. My father loved that actually. So I wrote an article telling the famous story of one of the Chassidim who used to walk every Yom Tov to Lubavitch from his town. And as he got older, it became more difficult to walk. So his family said, instead of schlepping yourself, why don't we take a horse and a wagon and take you before Yom Tov, obviously. And he said, B'shumei for not. And they said, why not? To make it easier. So he said, listen, because when I come up to heaven, after Me'ev Esim Shana, after 120 years, and they asked me, what merit did I have? What merits do I have? So the only merit I can come up with is that I walked to my Rebbe. And I don't want to fed a horse coming along and saying, 1 second, I was a partner with you. You wouldn't have been able to go without me. In my Lubavitch, you can fed nishtab. In my Lubavitch, I don't want to have a horse. And that was his reason. So I'm saying, so I wrote my article, I wrote then, and I say it now. In Lubavitch, my Lubavitch is stuck in fed. If there's a fed, it's not Lubavitch. I heard the Rebbe once told somebody who was saying that it was Machlokes, a particular Chabad community. So she stopped him and she said to him, the Zaydet Gezok, the Rebbe Shmosei Eid, the Rebbe Rashab said, as in Lubavitch is all good. In Lubavitch everything is good. So he said, but Rebbe, it's not good. So she smiled and said to him, if it's not good, it's not Lubavitch. So, say Machlokes in Lubavitch, if there's Machlokes, they already have taken themselves out of the category. Lubavitch is Luba, from the word love. The whole Yesod of Chassidus is Avos Yisrael. The whole Yesod of Chassidim and the Rabbeim was all about Avos Yisrael. It's sad to see when there are such, different opinions are entitled. There's ways Taylor says that people have different opinions. But if different opinions become personalized, they become petty, it becomes sometimes even angry and negative, that's not Lubavitch. So I don't have an answer how to deal with that. The only answer is we have to spread light. Remember, Machlokes can only happen when you fuel it with fire, with fuel. Every fire needs fuel. And if you stay away from it, then let the people who want to fight, let them be the only ones that fight with each other. And maybe that will also diminish it. The worst part of Machlokes is when people start building camps, machnas. I'm on this side, I'm on that side. Let it be isolated. Each of us has absolute control not to bring it into our homes, into our families, into our communities. That's totally your control. And the more people do that, then those that remain, let them remain. And usually that diffuses it, because most people don't like to be the ones that show that they're the ones that are doing the shooting. They want to hide behind others. They want to hide behind their community. It's the board, it's the jury, etc. So here's not the space in this time of the year we should be speaking only about positive things, but since there is, from time to time we see these things, that's the way we deal with it. If you have ability to have influence in a positive way, not like the Rebbe says, in a cynical way, the Rebbe says that there's Reit for Shalom, they vertreiben them Shalom. There's two sides, and there's a third side. So Reit for Shalom means they're supposed to mean that pursue peace. Instead, they vertreiben, which means instead of pursuing peace, they chase away peace by becoming a third party. That's not what we're talking about. If you have an influence in a subtle, discreet way, by all means. But the best way is to be yourself and to be with your family intact and not allow the fires, these negative fires, especially of divisiveness, to infect and toxify your life, especially in this period in time when we have to increase in Shabbos and so in every possible way. Next question. It's a question that was already from the previous weeks and I kept putting off, so let's deal with it now. Soldiers leaving their post. When is it appropriate to leave one's post? So the question writes, how can one know when it's necessary, when it's a necessary step to move on from a particular position and job, and when it may be abandoning the post that was destined for him? The Rebbe addresses the concern. Oh, 1 second, let me correct myself. Okay, I jumped the gun here. Fine, that's the question. Now, this is a question that's been asked in different forms and formats. I believe I discussed it in the past as well. And we know that Rebbe's general position that there's never a time to abandon a post. We're not talking about obviously where you have no control over it, God forbid, for reasons that are beyond. But even then, you may not know this, but even in times, the difficult times in Russia, the Rebbe never imposed his will on anyone, but when he was asked, and he said, if you ask my opinions, he didn't want, especially leaders and rabbis and educators and shachtim and so on in the community, to leave even when it was dangerous. The Frierdiker Rebbe would never have left Russia, he says, unless he was forced out. Because a leader is supposed to be on his post, there's no such thing as leaving a post, period. And wherever you find anyone writing to the Rebbe about leaving a post, it's always negates the idea. So I don't know if there's an exception, to be honest. If you feel there is, so go speak to Chassidus Applied and go through the different reasons and let them look into what the Rebbe would say in similar situations. Again, I'm not talking about a situation where, for example, recently I had to deal with a couple with a very unhealthy child, God forbid, they had no choice to leave where they were for the reasons that for healing for their child, they had to leave the city where they were. But even then, they maintain a presence, and they have to constantly travel back and forth. But there, it's a story, a very unique situation. And God forbid, no one should even know of such a thing. So generally speaking, the answer is, it's never a time to leave a particular position, especially if we're talking about, and I assume this is writing about a position in Klei Kodesh, meaning something doing with its education or rabbinics or leadership and so on. If you're talking about a job, just a job in general, well, listen, if you have a better job offer and it's a different city, by all means. But if, as the Rebbe said many times, if you are in a position where people are dependent on you, students, community people, adults, anyone that you are having ashpah and a positive ashpah, you're part of a pillar of a piece of a community, then you have to wonder whether leaving is you're able to leave. That would be even if someone is not the community leader. That's the general directive. More specifically, we have here a letter that I wanted to read. Anyone who wants the letter, obviously, please send us your email. Add the form, but please add your email because I cannot send you a letter without you telling us who you are because we have no way of knowing. It's all anonymous. So this is a letter from the Rebbe addressing the concern of a Jewish chaplain, and I'll read just some excerpts of it because it also captures the point. It's an interesting angle to this theme. The Rebbe said, the concern of the Jewish chaplain, with regard to the general topic of your letter, namely that you're a chaplain and are endeavoring to fulfill your duties to the best of your abilities, but you now find that it would be difficult to carry out the task of a Jewish chaplain as you now conceive of its responsibility in light of your greater commitment to Yiddishkeit. You ask, therefore, whether you ought to relinquish your post. So this is what the questioner writes. It's a letter written to an officer of the staff chaplain, a Marine Corps base in Camp Butler, Okinawa, and the FPO here is Seattle. There's a letter from the 28th of Tishrei, Tafshin Lamed Zayin. Now, so what's happening here is, before I go on to the Rebbe's answer, this chaplain clearly became cruel in his observance of Yiddishkeit, and as a result, he's thinking that now that he knows what his responsibilities are, so what he did till now was simply not adequate. So therefore, better she should relinquish his post. And the Rebbe responds, and I'll read briefly some of the excerpts. Perhaps you have heard of my general view in similar situations, but I'll outline it briefly. So again, the Rebbe says clearly his general view. Every Jew is always a soldier in the service of God, including the duty of spreading godliness among fellow Jews, with emphasis on the actual deed, namely fulfillment of God's commandments, the mitzvahs in daily life. Certainly in our age of confusion and perplexity, the call to duty is more urgent than ever. On the other hand, there's also very favorable circumstances in the widespread search for truth and real value on the part of the new generation, even among young people whose parents and grandparents had placed a priority in the pursuit of material well-being through professions and careers, almost to the exclusion of Yiddishkeit in their personal lives. If every Jew is in the service of God, as noted above, how much more so one whom the supreme Hashgacha Pratis has placed in the chaplaincy, and has moreover given him the schus of gaining deeper insights into Yiddishkeit, to the extent of reassessing his position. It is clear that the response to the said call of duty should be, especially of one who is not just a private but a ranking officer. Of course, the new assessment presents new challenges, but as in the case of a military outpost facing increased pressure, the answer is not to abandon the front, but to call out reserves and reinforcements. So also in the case of facing a personal challenge, it needs to be the same idea. It is certain that the inner forces are there, for God will not give one a task which is beyond one's capacity to carry out. In the case of the military, there can sometimes be a miscalculation, but not so with Hashgacha Pratis. Thus, it is only necessary to bring out these forces from the potential to actuality. Even if the ultimate success is in some doubt, the Teres Chaim does not permit one to abandon his responsible position, how much more so when there is the assurance of Yegaitu Matzasi. Then the Rebbe continues on, speaking more about Nasav and Nishma, the role of a soldier in the army, applying that. Obviously, he's writing to a chaplain in the army, using the military as the Rebbe usually does, as an example to bring out the point, but the point can also be carried over. Again, if anybody wants to see this letter, please let me know. Okay. Let's go to the next question. Having children late in life. Hi, Rabbi Jacobs. I have listened to many of your episodes, and I'm truly grateful for all the insight you have given on so many topics. I'm hoping you can help clarify a personal dilemma. My husband is 50, and I'm a handful of years his junior. We would like to continue having more children. Amongst the doubts we have, the greatest one is it fair to bring children into this world, and perhaps not be able to give them the youthful parental support that they need? Is it fair to our children that we will be so old when they are so young? I pray to be young forever, and I will actively do whatever I can do to reach this goal, but this is not something completely within our control, and the numbers won't change with time or circumstance. Can you clarify this personal dilemma? Did the Rebbe ever discuss having children later in life? I'm hoping you will tend to this question soon, because we don't have much wiggle room, shall we say, to ponder our confusion. Thank you so much. I don't recall when the Rebbe spoke about family planning in 1980 and 81, and then subsequent years, whether he specifically spoke. Well, actually, you know what? Let me correct myself. He did actually specifically speak about elder parents, but I will say the following. Children are a blessing, and the Rebbe's position is very unequivocal and clear. Barring any medical or emergency situations, like pekuach nefesh, God forbid, the children are a blessing, and we should not do anything to stop this blessing to manifest in our lives. And with this blessing will come blessings for parnosa, and blessings for health, and blessings for the ability to deal with these children. And this is true whether the parents are 20 years old or whether they're 45 years old. Obviously, everything goes up to tell you go listen to a doctor, but not if a doctor tells you to stop this blessing. And for the reasons you're describing, basically the Rebbe's attitude is the Eibishter will give you the keiches, and you'll remain young in spirit. And it's not unfair if you do what you have to do. It would be the equivalent if a young couple, 25 years old, say we don't feel equipped to bring up children. We need more education. We need more money. We don't have the experience. I grew up in an abusive home. So I don't want to bring children into the world. Well, none of us are perfect. There's no such parent. There's no such thing in this world as a perfect parent and perfect parents. So with that attitude, you can suddenly go challenge every choice to bring children into the world. Every stage of life and every situation, every person has their challenges. So the answer is absolutely have children as long as God allows you to have children and God blesses you with children. By all means, bring them into this world. I'll add one more point from the Zohar. It says that when a couple are together in a kedusha, in a holy, sacred way, intimately, so even if it doesn't bear a physical child, a neshama is born from that, which explains Avram and Sarah's intimacy all the years before they had Yitzchak, and explains the idea, the sanctity of intimacy between couples are beyond childbearing age. Because why? Because the yichud, kedusha, the sacred unity between husband and wife, in the eyes of God, and is a sacred act, and we have to do whatever is possible, and it gives birth in the highest levels. And if God blesses, that soul will come down into this world in a physical way. That's my response, and it's pretty straightforward, to be honest. Again, if you have particular challenges or unique things, so maybe you need to speak to someone who can help explain this further, help make it easier. People have psychological blocks or they have concerns and fears. By all means, talk about it. But in this form that we're talking here, this is how I would approach it. Based, of course, on the Rebbe's words. Next question. Am I too sensitive? To Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Sensitivity is a tremendous virtue. It allows us to empathize with another. But for me, sensitivity seems to be a major weakness. Every time I have a mere disagreement with someone, I'm left crying while the other person seems unfazed. Even when it comes to small issues, I get hurt so easily. I know disagreeing with me isn't a personal affront to me, but I can't help feeling unsettled. I try to avoid the other person becoming, and I become angrier. So I usually cut the conversation short and retreat to my room. Actually, I should correct myself. The person's right. I try to avoid the other person becoming angrier. So I usually cut the conversation short and retreat to my room and cry. How can I become stronger? What can help me realize that disagreeing is a part of life? How can I help myself not be as affected by others? Thank you very much for being there for all of us. Very good question, as all the questions are, especially being the real questions in real life. Yes, sensitivity is an unbelievable virtue. The virtue of being sensitive. So many people are insensitive, are callous, are oblivious, are aloof, selfish. So sensitivity is an unbelievable virtue. Obviously, a sensitive person, yesiv das, yesiv mechev, someone that has more das has more pain. More sensitivity can lead to more pain because you're empathizing and relating to others. That's why we need to have boundaries and know when our sensitivity has to be measured. You cannot annihilate your own life just because you're sensitive to another person. Just wanted to qualify that. Regarding your situation, this question or situation, I would say the following. Sensitivity is a gift from Hashem. It's not about because we just have a sensitive personality. The key thing you have to remember is your sensitivity is a positive. To stop being sensitive because you get too sensitive because others hurt you is not the way. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. What you do is to realize that your sensitivity has to be one that is filled and infused with a bittul, with humility. What you're describing is more fear of confrontation, being insecure, or something of that nature. So your sensitivity is spilling over to become an unhealthy form of sensitivity. You become so sensitive you can't deal with any real life confrontation or real life challenge. So when I disagree with you, it drives you to tears. So I'm not judging you, and I understand where it comes from and validating it, but the way to correct it is to realize sensitivity is a gift. You have to say to yourself, Hashem made me sensitive. That does not mean I should be disturbed by another person's behavior. It should mean I should be sensitive. I hear that other person, and then say to yourself, okay, God also blessed me with a position, with a dignity, with a sense of self, to measure a way to balance the two. In the Spheres, we talk about the sphere of Netzach and the sphere of Hoid. Netzach is drive, determination, ambition, victory, Netzach. Hoid is yielding, Hoidah, acknowledging, admitting, being flexible. And they come together, just like chesed, the antithesis to chesed, the balancing antithesis that tempers chesed is gvura, discipline, channeling, withholding, measuring, not just to give. What is the balance to determination and drive? Is the sensitivity of Hoyd. But Hoyd also needs Netzach. So we talk about tzaddikim, and even the tzaddikim who have the total bittul, they need shmini shebeshminis. You can't be an askupa and a dresses, which means a doormat. You have to always be able to have a sensitivity and a sense, not just to another, but also to yourself. And that's what I read in this letter, this question, the thing that's missing. You have the sensitive part, but missing is understanding that having a takif and a strength is also part of who you are. It's also part of your divine nature. And recognizing your sensitivity is not just about you. Your work has to be is to channel and harness your sensitivity in a way that does not compromise you and does not cause you to become so overwhelmed by any type of situation. Now this may take some training and some guiding, but it's doable. I've seen it done. It's not taking away your sensitivity, it's harnessing and saying, you know what, in this situation, should you be sensitive, should you not? Give an example. I'll give you an example. I had a situation, someone came to speak to me, a very sensitive person. But every time something comes up, they always feel that they look at themselves and they're always blaming themselves and saying, I have to be more sensitive to the other person. You know, the opposite of what others do, they're always blaming someone else. This person always blaming themselves, and it's coming from a good place and good intentions because they really have a bittul in them. But the problem is the bittul has gone overboard to the point that they need to learn. 1 second, maybe you're not wrong. So you need to check with someone. And in this case, what I suggested to this person, I said, 1 second, next time there's a confrontation, why don't you call me up? Tell me what it is. And let's discuss whether it's something you should be deferring to and then being resentful quietly, or maybe you shouldn't be deferring to. This doesn't mean you have to fight. But sometimes you have to be a little firm. Sometimes you have to take a stand in a position. It's not a constant. The person said to me, but then I lose my sense. I said, no, sensitivity is apitated. When to be sensitive. Like it says, someone that is sensitive, compassionate to someone that is to the achzorim, to cruel people, that end up being cruel to compassionate people. You have to know sensitivity like chesed and gvura and netzach and ed is always a balance. And it's never just, being sensitive as an end in itself. You have to know the circumstances. Being sensitive, for example, to a criminal may not be healthy at all. Being sensitive to a criminal, you have to, you judge in order to preserve. Your intention is chesed, but sometimes you need gvura, sometimes you need a little strength. And you can't just go with saying, let's just be sensitive and compassionate and forget about what is right and wrong. You could end up hurting yourself and others. This is basically a boundary issue and a boundary discussion of knowing where the boundaries of sensitivity are and where they're not. For more on this, please write or consult with a Rav or Mashpia, and I'm sure you can find examples, step by step, how you can balance your sensitivity in life. We're going to do a few follow-ups, and then we're going to do the Chassidus question and the essay. So one quick follow-up, a few weeks ago, in the episode right before July 4th, I had mentioned about July 4th, Independence Day, and said I had not found from the Rebbe direct mention of July 4th, but since then someone did send me a letter, actually a letter on the 3rd of El Tavshinun Aleph, August 13th, 1991, to none else than President George Bush. And there the Rebbe says clearly he's thanking him for his blessings in connection to the 50th anniversary of Chav Ches Sivim, which is when the Rebbe came to America. And not reading the whole letter, the Rebbe says, by divine providence, your kind letter was dated on the morrow, meaning the day after of the anniversary of the nation's birth, of the nation's birthday, meaning July 4th. It is well to remember that the founders of the nation considered Independence Day. The Rebbe makes direct reference to Independence Day as a day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion and to God Almighty, quote unquote. By divine providence, also my arrival in the United States in 1941 coincided with the declaration by Congress that year, making July 4th a legal public holiday. So there, clear mention, and just to conclude that circle. Tznius follow-up. Regarding your last discussion on Tznius, Chav Beis Tammuz, which means in the previous weeks we spoke about in the last few episodes, your comments could come across as defending those who don't want to hear about Tznius. And that only when it's presented in a perfect way, which some have tried to do, or don't know how to do, should they take it to heart. So basically suggesting my writing, my speaking, in a way, is feeding into those people who don't want to hear about it, unless it's presented perfectly. In your example of a family that was pushing Tznius, but there was Rahman al-Islam molestation going on, I want to emphasize that who says that it's not the lack of Tznius that was the stimulant for the molestation? Without, God forbid, ever condoning molestation, lack of Tznius could have been the cause for the animal's behavior. Although I understand your concept of Tznius being a symptom, I definitely believe that it can be a cause. A cause, not an excuse, for sick people to act on their sickness, and lahadl for innocent men or bochum to be aver on a most serious avera. Let me just be clear that I know your intention was not chas v'shalom to defend those not being tznius, but just because it ideally needs to be presented in better ways, and inward tznius may be just as or more important, does not mean that outer tznius should not be taken in the most serious way possible. Okay, I read it as you wrote. And I don't fully disagree with what you're saying, but I think maybe you don't understand my entire point. My entire point was not discussing tznius, but there's a climate where people are presenting in a way that people are not even listening. So forget about whether whether I said it the right way or didn't say it the right way. Even habaychen is the test is it affecting people? So as important as tznius may be, if you don't present it right, you're not going to achieve anything. I was not defending anyone behaving that way because I was saying we have to look at ourselves. This is not talking about people who have the challenges involved. We're talking about people trying to do something about it, the method that needs to be approached to. But I thank you for your comments. The Rebbe I never knew follow-up. In following up with your segment on missing a Rebbe I never knew, all of the explanations that a Rebbe is not Chaim Psarim, rather Chaim Ruchnim, and we can connect with learning the Rebbe's Torah, Diksovim Lo Zechayich, are all true and have a powerful impact. However, coming from Parshas Pinchas, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say any of these things when he left this world. He didn't rely on Ruchnis to lead the Yidden. It was so important to have a human being who was alive and physically present to lead. We see the only time when Moshe initiates a conversation with the Torah, Veidaber Moshe al Hashem Leimer. He knew Ruchnis and his Chassidus were not enough. He knew that Ruchnis and Chassidus were not enough. People need actual people to lead them. Asher Yetzim v'asher Yevim. Right. Moshe wasn't satisfied with having Ksovim to leave over for the Yidden to connect to. No, he made sure he had a successor, a human physical person who could relate to every person. As we know, the Rebbe Rashab didn't just leave Ksovim, he left his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Rebbe Rayadz gave us the Rebbe. And now, how long is there a Shvi? 44 years, 67 years. Okay. So a legitimate question. So first I want to say this. Regarding leaving a Mamal Mokim, Moshe leaving Yeshua, the Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe, and all the generations. Remember, it's not the person that's the key. It's that the Torah lives on through that person. Remember, Chaim Ruchnim, as I mentioned, is not just a thing after Yistalkus. It means that the Chayev Tzaddik, the Shama Beguf, soul and the body, is a godly person. His life is spiritual life. Ava v'yira, love and awe, and amunah, and faith. Now, it's embodied in a physical person you can speak to. And obviously, that's what we want, and that's what should be. That's one thing I want to say. The second thing is, there's Hashgacha Pratis here. If the Rebbe and the Eibishter wanted to leave us on Mamal Mokim, they could have done so. They didn't. I will not understand and explain Gimel Tammuz and why they should or should not have. People can go and speculate on that. But that's something that's not in our control. Moshe left Yeshua. The Rebbe Rashab left the Rebbe. The Rebbe left the Rebbe. What do you want to do now? We can't lie down and die. We don't have an answer for this. If you're suggesting let's appoint a new Rebbe, so you'll go. Good luck. Go try. Let's see how you can succeed in that. It's not our job to appoint Rebbes. That's God's job. If Rachmana Litzlan Chaz v'Shalom, after the Frierdiker Rebbe, there was no son-in-law altogether, what would have happened? I don't know what would have happened. But like I read in that letter that week as well, Was it sein? The größere Sache, was a größer Rebbe, there's a größer Rebbe, and he'll take care of it. I was not trying to suggest that we don't need an Hashem B'guf. Of course, that's what we want. I was saying, how do we deal right now with the situation? How do you connect? We have no choice but to connect through the Ksavim. And if there was a Gashmi's Dike Hemshech, so be it. Now I understand that some people say that's what compels us to say the Rebbe's here, but Gashmi's, fine, the Rebbe's Gashmi's being here, if that's the case, it's not a Gashmi's on our grubba terms because we don't see it. So what difference does it make? It doesn't help us. In concept, philosophical. And I don't want to even go there because, as I said, it's areas of total speculation. So my point is, what are we supposed to do now? We can't say that we were not given the ability to do something. As far as appointing, it's not our job to do that. As I said, that's the Beisha Rabbeinu did it correct, and then the other Rabbeim did it, and we have no power over that except what the Rabbeim gave us. And that's what I was addressing. Next question. Follow-up, I should say. Waiting around for marriage follow-up. Esteemed Chief Mashpia and Rabbi Jacobson. Thank you for that nice title. Thank you for your wonderful ongoing MyLife series. You bring lots of godly light into this world and into our lives. I just wanted to give some feedback to your last episode in which someone wrote in about looking back at past dates. He suggested introspection and looking at oneself with a critical eye and almost berating oneself for missed opportunities. I wish to present another perspective. The Rebbe often spoke about Meshichas Halev. Meshichas Halev means that your heart is drawn or attracted to. I'm sure that there's much discussion about what the term means. But I think one way of interpreting it is a good feeling, an almost instinctual feeling that this is right. I would caution your viewers that they should never shut down that voice inside of them. If someone is dating and their gut tells them it's not right, they should listen to that inner voice, despite what their parents, mashpiyim or shatchanim tell them. It will be best for them and the other person. Allowing the inner voice to be drowned out is terrible and will only cause grief. I say this from personal experience. My first relationship, when I allowed my inner voice to be overruled by the voices of the shatchanim, as well as well-intentioned mashpia, ended in divorce. Conversely, when I met my current spouse, I could tell almost immediately we were right for each other. We've been happily married for 7 years. I'd love to hear your perspective about this, and of course, please keep doing your amazing work. I really must say I'm really taken by this exchange. I feel honored to be able to be a platform for last week's letter and this response, because each of you are contributing something vital. This is a very good question you make, and it's a very important point that Rebbe told. Rabbi Grona tells the story that when he was dating, not he was ready to get engaged, he's wondering whether he should continue, and the Rebbe said, the matters of the heart. Nicht dein Tate can help you, not your father can help you, not your mother can help you, not I can help you. There's no question. And I remember Tav Shalom Hey, before I go on. Tav Shalom Hey, Tu B'Av, the Rebbe was speaking at the end of Messiah Masechta Attaining, and there it says, of course, on Tu B'Av, the Bnei Yerushalayim or Bnei Tzion, the daughters of Jerusalem, Bnei Tzion, would dress up and go out into the fields, and the Miyuchasis and the Yofis and all that, and they would speak and they say, Bocher Sana Yinecha, Bocher, raise your eyes and look at me. And the Rebbe said, we see from this two things. On one hand, till that moment, the Bocher shouldn't be raising his eyes, he should be busy in Torah. But then, once it comes of age and he's going out in the area of Shatchanos, he can't be with his eyes in the heavens or the eyes in Torah. He has to look at the woman and has to have a Meshichas Halev. So Meshichas Halev is definitely a component. But we all know that the Shidduch is primarily a divine element. Obviously, like everything in life, the Eibishter wants us to make a keli, and that we should be, our mind and our heart should be invested. So you don't just marry the first person you meet. There's a shtadlus, there's an effort, and there are soulmates. The Eibishter matches different souls to each other. That alone tells you it's not just anyone. But I think you have to have a very important balance here, because some people say, I just don't feel it. And I could tell sometimes when I say that, I say to them myself, is this a really accurate feeling? So what your point is well taken, but what happens if somebody begins to become too picky and their gut feelings rejects everybody? Not everyone's gut feeling is always a healthy gut feeling. Sometimes it's for the wrong reasons. So I think I agree with you in fundamental area, and I think it's important, however, every person dating, if they're feeling in their gut something's missing, they should consult someone that they could talk to. I'm not talking about someone that's trying to persuade them to marry this person. Someone saying it's meaningless. Talk to a fresh set of eyes, because sometimes we become our own worst enemy in this type of sense of gut feeling. So I've seen gut feeling work both ways. On the other hand, to ignore gut feeling and say, no, I would never ignore it. I think it's a component, and Mashiachas Halev is a important element. But I've seen people in both directions, either are completely ignoring the Mashiachas Halev element, or everything is Mashiachas Halev, I just don't feel it, and end up being really over picky, focusing on the wrong matters, and they start focusing on details and saying, that detail rubs me the wrong way. Her nose is a little off. My gut feeling tells me it's no good. I don't know if you would suggest what you said, that that's a reason to break off a shidduch. Everything else checks out. I've had people tell me she's great, but the look in the eye, the way she smiles bothers me. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't discuss it, get through it. But you have to remember that you have to know what a priority is and what a detail is also when it comes to gut feeling. So as I said, I agree with the general gist of it, but not in extremes, everything with moderation, everything most importantly with balance. Knowing that there's an element, knowing what, I think two things are key here. Knowing what your priorities are, that the priorities are in place, and then also gut feeling, but not just a gut feeling without priorities, because gut feeling can be about anything. She doesn't have enough college degrees, something wrong, etc., etc. Okay. Let's go to the Chassidus question, and then we'll do the essays. The Chassidus question is, can you please discuss the concept of Ratzon in Chassidus? Ratzon. Ratzon is a term used in so many discourses, and I've never had anyone explain what it means exactly. It's usually translated as will or desire. Does that refer to our everyday wills and desires? How is that consistent with Ratzon being a superconscious faculty in Kesser, unlike our internal cognitive and emotional faculties, in the Keiches Pnimiyim? Is Ratzon something that we have any control over, or does it control us? Ratzon seems like such an elusive thing to master, so how can someone properly align his emotions with his Ratzon? Another person wrote in similar vein, similar idea, Shalom. Hemshech Samachei, that's the Hemshech of Tafrei Samachei from the Rebbe I, where he talks about Ratzon at length. So here the question writes, what is the difference between the higher and lower level of a person's will? In Tanya we learn, question number 2, in Tanya we learn that the paradoxical human can control only the expressions, but not the essence of the animal soul. Is that the case with willpower, or is will something we could own? Number 3, in practical terms, how can a person connect Ratzon to his emotion? Yeshua Koyach. Very good question. And yes, in Yeshiva, unfortunately, both Ratzon and Tainug, we hear it all the time, Ratzon and Tainug, and not always explained, especially where we can access it in our own beings. Like when you talk about moichin midis, moichin means with your cognitive skills, the ability to conceive, to comprehend, to come to conclusion, to connect with. Emotions, your love and attraction, your with repulsion and measure and discipline, gvura, compassion with tiferes and all the midis. Ratzon and Tainug, what can we identify? What's a Ratzon? If I want to right now have a good piece of steak, is that Ratzon HaNefesh? Is that what the Chassidus means? Tainug, when I have pleasure from a good ice cream, or pleasure from making money, is that the Tainug that Chassidus talks about? Tainug and Ratzon. Now we know Ratzon and Tainug are definitely two forces in life, and you could say it really encompasses everything. It doesn't say what the Ratzon, just like your mind, you can read, you can use your mind for holy things, you can use your mind for unholy things. So why not say Ratzon and Tainug also that way? That's correct. So, but let's just analyze it. So we say Ratzon and Tainug are Keser, like mentioned here. Ratzon being Arich and Tainug being Atik. What's the difference between Keser and the 10 Keiches, or the 9 Keiches, because when you count Keser you don't count Das? The answer is that these are called Keiches Pnimiyim, like you mentioned, internalized, very integrated faculties, immanent faculties. They are tangible, they're concrete, you're conscious of them. Ratzon and Tainug are called Keiches Makifim. They don't have a locality. In many places in Chassidus, and especially in Ayin Beis, in the chapters 40s, talks at length the difference between Ratzon and the Keiches, many, many differences. And one of them, it doesn't have a locality, it doesn't have a local place, because Ratzon could be the Ratzon to move your leg, it could be the Ratzon to look at something, it could be the Ratzon to conceive of something. Conception, the mind is in the brain. Emotions in the heart. The power to write is in your arm. The power to throw is in your arm. The power to walk is in your legs. etc., etc. Where is Ratzon located? So it has no locality. That's one aspect of Makif. But it's more than just locality. Makif means Ratzon is a more of a transcendent faculty. It controls, it does not train and educate the faculties, it controls, it's almost a dominant. Ratzon, like a shelut and meishel, it tells you what to do. That's why you can completely not want to do something by nature. Who wants to put, for example, go into a cold, frozen water? But your Ratzon can override your interest and your logic and say, do it anyway. So it has a super dominance. We're not talking about Attaining, so I'm not going to go into Attaining right now. In that sense, Ratzon is a transcendent force, and also necessary, because you could have all the faculties in place, but if you don't have a desire for it, you don't have a will to do it, it won't be done. But clearly for Chassidus, there's even more than that. Because Ratzon touches also what's called the Keiches Makifim in the Nefesh, and we say Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida. So Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama is, Nefesh is Nehi, Ruach is Chagas, the Midas, Chesed, Gvur, Teferes, and Neshama is Chabad. Ratzon is Chaya. What's Chaya? Chaya, we know, is already a deeper spiritual dimension within us. The Ratzon HaAdam, for example, the Ratzon HaNeshama, the desire of the soul, no, Nishta Neshama vil, Nishta ken, not Neshama doesn't want it, and not that it can be disconnected from Hashem. The Ratzon Atzmi, Chassidus calls it. So what is that? That's already, we're connecting more reflective of your soul. So you can explain it this way. The soul is obviously an amorphous entity that doesn't have any faculties, not Attaining, not Ratzon, not any of the Keiches. But when you say, where does your soul manifest? Someone to say, what does your soul look like? So you can't say it looks like a chesed or it looks like chokhmah. It's like a nefesh hamaskelis, meaning intelligence reflects what our soul is like. But a Ratzon would be like the, so to speak, the chief of staff that the king speaks to. Your neshama, when it wants to express itself first in Attaining and then in Ratzon. So Ratzon is not negay, the Ratzon with it to use your intelligence, the will to think, the will to conceive, the will to feel, the will to walk, the will to do anything. That is the specifics. Like we say in the bracha, that's the tzivui, that's Ratzon. Then it says, al natilis yadayim, al hanochas tefillin, whatever it may be. That's the specifics. The Ratzon from the Chassidus says, from the Ratzon point of view, doesn't make a difference. Because you're fulfilling God's Ratzon. That's why Esek b'mitzvah, patim in a mitzvah, when a person does a mitzvah, he's part from other mitzvahs, as the Raga Chavar and the Rebbe explains from Peich Chassidus, because all the mitzvahs is one Ratzon Eliyah. And that's why Altei Adam Shekel, a person shouldn't go away mitzvahs, because they all have, in Ratzon, they're all one. So the Kabbalah sale is just doing that. So in that sense, Ratzon is also an equalizer. Then there's how Ratzon manifests in each particular. So think of it like the chief of staff of the king, he's telling the person who delivers the mail, go do the mail. The person who prepares food in the kitchen, go prepare food in the kitchen. The person who's dealing with the army, military, go deal with the military. The person that deals diplomacy with other countries, do that. That's their particular job, but they're all fulfilling one Ratzon, which is the Ratzon of the king. The Ratzon wants these different things. But from the Ratzon point of view, the chief of staff, all his job is simply to convey to each one of them what the king wants. The specifics, each of them will go do in their particular way. That's what Ratzon is. So Ratzon is in a way an interface between a completely undefined soul and the beginning of manifesting that soul in some type of experience and consciousness. Now, Ratzon without faculties, God forbid, would be like someone has a stroke and they want to do something but they can't move their hands. Faculties without Ratzon, like Chassidus brings mania, a certain illness, is a person has all the faculties working but something is not motivating. Maybe the nerves or maybe the ability for them to really, for the Ratzon is not there. So you could be like a person who's completely like in a catatonic state. Everything may be functioning physically, but there's no desire, there's no will to do something, or a person is a very depressed state. So you need them to work together. So with that said, let me see now back to the question. Can we control our Ratzon? So in Ayin Beis, again, probably in the chapters, thinking where it is, maybe in the 60s, I'd have to look it up. He says there's something very interesting. He says, for example, the love of a parent to a child, he just says is not midas, that's Ratzon. Because that's how we're wired. Midas is what's conceived, when through conception, through your mind, you contemplate on something, and you learn to be attracted, or you learn to love it, or you learn to be repelled by it. But he says midas that are natural, midas tivim, he calls Ratzon, which gives an extra element here, that Ratzon is also the wiring of who we are and our desires that are natural desires. We have control over that. We don't have control over loving a child. You could harness it, you could keep it concealed, you could act on it in the wrong way, but there's fundamentals in Ratzon that you really cannot change. At the same time, Chassidus says that we could change what we should desire. Instead of desiring, let's say, God forbid, something negative, desire something positive. So you have to say that in Ratzon there's two elements. And maybe that's what he refers to in Samache, the higher and lower. I want to look into it a little more, and I'm going to follow up on this next week because I see I don't have the time to cover it all. So we'll have a part 2 to this. I'll say the following, and then we'll conclude, at least in this part 1, that Ratzon has two elements. There's the Ratzon, there's like in anything, like in the brain, there's also two elements. You can determine whether you're going to use your mind and conceive and understand and Chochmah Bina Das. But everybody is wired a certain way. Some people, their Chochmah is stronger than their Bina. Some people have a certain way of understanding things. Like Chassidus talks about the mezeg of the Mayach, mezeg damim or mezeg, more blood or more water, meaning there's a certain mixture and a certain complexion to your mind, and certain minds work a certain way, certain ones the way they're wired. And yet at the same time, you also have much ability whether to use your mind, and you can develop it, you can grow, you can, obviously with the effort, make your mind and cultivate it and exercise your mind. So Ratzon too, there's certain fundamentals that we have certain desires. That's how we're wired. But you still have a Veda, an ability to control those desires, either to suppress, or to direct, or to harness, or to bring it out and open a Ratzon, where you use it, I said earlier, where even though the situation may be a very difficult one, your Ratzon Atzmi says, no, I'm going to be Meisha Nefesh for Hashem. So clearly Ratzon has both those elements. We'll stop here at this point. I'm going to continue more. If you have any further questions, I will include them in our next week's discussion in part 2 of this discussion. Let's do the essays. The essays, 3 essays. And I have to say again, wonderful essays. One especially I was really taken by one of them. The first essay is Attaining a Mindset of Depth in a Shallow World by Bela Oster, 18 years old, Mayanot Women's Program Shlucha, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay. The problem, she writes, as the modern world spins faster and faster into the future, the physicality in our lives only gets more and more advanced. In response, the world is witnessing a huge paradigm shift, with shallow definitions of fulfillment placed at the top of our priorities. And she goes on to describe some research and studies. Okay. As a parallel phenomenon, the search for deep meaning has plummeted. In 1966, 86% of college freshmen were motivated by a quest for a meaningful life philosophy. Today, the percentage has dropped to less than 50%. And the essay continues, the importance that the modern world places on materialism is taking a toll on our generation's ideals. Among many other issues, we struggle with a life of extreme anxiety, a refusal to trust that life is directed by a greater power, and an inability to open to others that look different than ourselves. Thankfully, Chassidus gives us the tools to deal with the shallow values we absorb from society. To understand how it does so, we will explore the Chassidus concept of Tznius and Primus. This will provide us with the process of looking beyond the surface of our world and finding the depth contained within. Then, by understanding the depth within our world, we can tackle the issues that were previously insurmountable. And she goes on in a very beautiful way to define the depth. The Alter Rebbe's famous story that he looked at the beam and he only saw the lakus, the keich apel benifel, brings it down in a very nice way. The Maimer Achasha Alti Eter, Tofrei Shayin from the Rebbe Rashab, where it discusses a process, how we find true depth, how to trace it back to God, using the Rebbe Marash, a practical solution for love, joy, and trust. When we prioritize things according to their spiritual interior rather than their physical exterior, we can solve many of the challenges we face daily, including sadness, loneliness, distrust, and conflict. Excellent essay with the conclusion of a how-to by realizing every creation has 2 facets, exterior and a deeper element, contemplating a 5-step process. Excellent essay. This and all essays can be seen at meaningfullife.com/mylife. We have these essays, and we also, if you subscribe to our newsletter, we give you every new an essay as they're published. The next essay is Love in Three Dimensions. And first begins with the case study of Chaim, a 13-year-old boy who struggles in school due to lack of motivation and low self-esteem. To pass time, Chaim likes to hang out with the wrong group of friends who provide him with the attention he lacks at home. The next essay is by Miriam Gutta, age 31, student at McGill University, Côte Saint-Luc, Quebec. It's called Love in Three Dimensions. And she begins, Chaim is a 14-year-old boy who struggles in school due to lack of motivation and low self-esteem. To pass time, Chaim likes to hang out with the wrong group of friends who provide him with the attention he lacks at home. In fact, ever since he can remember, his parents have disregarded, disrespected, and ignored him. Today, Chaim feels incapable and worthless. This anecdote portrays typical problems that youths constantly face. Psychological models like Maslow's self-actualization theory believe that in order for a child to grow up stable and healthy, his parents, guardians, or teachers need to satisfy both his basic and psychological needs. What kind of tools can one use to meet these requirements? For many years, Jewish people have used Chassidus as a toolkit to deal with contemporary issues. As such, how can Chassidus provide specific strategies for parents who look to raise emotionally stable children? More specifically, which concepts of Chassidus can help a parent meet the essential needs of a child? When one analyzes the benefits of Avos Hashem, love of God, Avos Yisrael, love for one's fellow Jew, and Avos Attaining, love for Torah, one can conclude that a parent can meet the needs of his child through the three Avos. I found this essay to be tremendous, honestly. I think it's an excellent tool that can be used in schools and at home, and goes on to explain that defining the needs parents have to meet in order to raise stable and healthy children, and integrates it very much with contemporary psychological models, but then takes the key to Avos Hashem for the child's spiritual needs. How Avos Hashem translates into a child's spiritual needs, Avos Yisrael for a child's psychological needs, and Avos Ateidah for a child's spiritual and psychological needs. And really well done. And it actually comes down with practical applications, both in the context of medicine and how, and practical examples like say brachas on food out loud so the child will want to do the same, dress Tznius so the child will dress the same way, daven with a minyan so the child will want to daven. I'm not going to give you all the details. Check out this essay. Excellent. Really. And same thing with Avos Yisrael, with bullets and practical examples, and Avos Ateidah. And just to add, the Rebbe himself, at the beginning of the first Fabrengen, Yud Shvat Tavshin Yirav, the first official Fabrengen, made this, the first declaration was that there's the three Avos. So this really works well. And with the conclusion, all in all, to raise an emotionally strong and stable child, a parent must consider both the child's psychological and spiritual needs. Psychologically, the child needs attention, self-esteem, acknowledgement, respect, structure, strength. And spiritually, the child needs to feel connected to God. And sums up this idea very well, and I commend you for an excellent essay. Yes, I would highlight this one. Next, Learning Love from God by Alter Deitch, 26 years old, teacher at Arugas Habaysim, Brooklyn, New York. Another excellent essay. Would you like to deepen your connection with the special people in your life? Are you searching for love? Would you like to learn the secret that God Himself employed when forming His relationship with us? Lubavitcher Rebbe shared this great lesson with us in 1957 when he delivered the discourse Basar Lagani, Come into my garden. The Rebbe teaches us that in order to be a mashpia, to reach out to one's partner, one must practice bittul. And goes into a discussion of psychological approach to relationships, using first psychologist Michael J. Formica once said, true love is actually about the choice to put another person before ourselves. Using all these interesting quotes, goes on to explain Chassidus' approach to relationships, using the idea of tzimtzum, the idea with examples like electricity, teacher, father. Beautifully done. Really brings down the ideas of Chassidus in a very practical and applicable way. And of course with conclusions
of how we learn from the Tzimtzum about our own bittul and relationships. So I commend you to that as well. I must say, these essays are very, very inspiring, and which is so much of what this MyLife Chassidus Applied is about, which is really to empower, stimulate, and inspire so many of you and all of us to take the greatest gift we have, which is Chassidus, Primis HaTeira, the Keser, the Even Tev, that unique precious stone in the king's crown, and make it applicable and practical to all of us in real life situations. And what better way to show that the Rebbe lives among us, the Chassidus lives with us, especially in these 9 days as we enter the 9-day period to turn this into a time where this dark place really has in it a tremendous amount of inner light in fulfilling the Kavona El Yena. And after Gimel Tammuz, obviously 9 days takes on a particular meaning, unique meaning and significance. But the goal is to turn it into, as I said, the greatest Yom Tevim, the Gula Amitzis Vashlema. So maybe fulfill that by using these days in adding in Torah and Tzedakah, and adding in all the directives of the Rebbe regarding these days, as I mentioned at the outset. Every Sunday we're here, 8 to 9 p.m. This has been MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 172. Next week, 8 to 9 p.m. We'll talk about Tisha B'Av, we'll talk about other special things, and please continue sending your questions and all your comments. Everyone should have a Simcha Dika week, a Teira Dika and Simcha Dika week, in transforming these 9 days into the Geula Hamitis Vashlema. Thank you.